Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S5 5080, The Count of Monte Cristo, Chapter 6. Sinbad the Sailor. In early 1838, two young men who lived in Paris, Monsieur Albert de Morcerf and his friend Baron Franz de Pinay, decided to spend that year's carnival in Rome. Before the start of the carnival, the Franz had traveled to Livorno because he had heard of an island near there was a good place to shoot wild goats. It was not difficult to find a small boat and pay the captain to take him to this island, which was called Monte Cristo. When they arrived at the island, they saw there was already a group of men on the beach sitting round the fire. "Smugglers, Excellency," said the captain. "A bandit. They can't be dangerous." In fact, he was welcomed by the men on the beach. He was even invited to have dinner with their chief. They tied an old shirt over his eye so he couldn't see anything and took him into a deep cave. When they uncovered his eyes, he looked round in delight. It was like an underground palace with thick carpets and rich wall hangings. The chief was a good-looking man with bright, intelligent eyes, black hair and beard, and very white skin. "Welcome to my home," he said in French to Franz. "You can call me Sinbad the Sailor. My servants will get you anything you want." For Franz, it was like being in a dream. He spent the evening in pleasant conversation with the man who called himself Sinbad, drinking wine and eating some of the best food he had ever tasted. He fell asleep on one of the thick carpet. When he woke up next morning, he found he was lying just outside the cave. He went to join the captain and sailors of his boat who were having breakfast on the beach. "Senor, Sinbad had to leave early," explained the captain. "See the white sail over there? That's his ship. He's on his way to Malaga. From the way he's sailing, he's going to Corsica, not Malaga," said Franz. "Aha. He's got two friends with him, bandits, you could call them. So he's taking them there first." "Bandits? Isn't Sinbad afraid that the police will catch him?" "No, not him. His ship is faster than any police boat." Franz no longer had any interest in shooting goats. He decided to return to Livorno, leaving the mysterious island behind him. The next day, Franz arrived in Rome and met Albert at their hotel. They asked the hotel owner, Signor Pastrini, to find them a carriage, but he explained he only had a very old one to offer them. "But remember, Excellencies, don't drive outside the city walls at night. There are bandits." "Franz, this is exciting," said Albert. "An adventure at last." "Be serious, Excellency. Luigi Bampa is the bandit chief. He kidnaps people and sometimes kills them," explained Signor Pastrini. They drove off to see the Colosseum in the moonlight. Albert sat dreaming on a stone seat, while Franz walked a little further away. As he stood in the shadow of a wall, he realized that he could hear two men on the other side of the wall having a secret conversation. "What have you discovered, Luigi?" asked one. To his surprise, Franz recognized the voice of Sinbad the Sailor. "There will be 2 executions on Tuesday, Excellency, and one of the men to die is my poor friend Peppino. Don't worry, I'll make sure he gets a pardon. If you can save him, Excellency, I'll do anything for you." And the 2 men disappeared into the shadow. After Franz and Albert had returned to the hotel and gone to bed, Franz spent a sleepless night, wondering what kind of man Franz the Sailor was, rich, powerful, and friendly with bandits. The next evening, Franz and Albert went to the theater. They were young men with a great interest in women than in the actors. They spent most of the time looking round at the other theater goers. Franz saw a beautiful young woman in Greek clothes, and next to her was the man he knew as Sinbad. There was something hard about the line of his mouth that made Franz shudder. The young man promised himself he would find out more about Sinbad. When he and Albert returned to the hotel, Signor Pastrini came to their room with a message. "The Count of Monte Cristo is staying here in the hotel, Excellencies, and has heard that you gentlemen need a better carriage. So he's offering you seats in his carriage and places at the windows of another hotel. You can watch the carnival from there. He also invites you to visit him tomorrow morning." The next morning, 2 young men were shown into the courtrooms by a richly dressed servant. When the Count of Monte Cristo came in, Franz saw through his disguise and recognized him at once as Sinbad the sailor, but he said nothing. He and Albert found many interesting things to discuss with the Count, and soon they started talking about the next day's execution. Think of putting 2 men to death in cold blood, said Franz. Were the poor man's crimes really so bad? Listen, his eyes suddenly full of hatred. If a man hurts or murders your father, mother, or lover, is prison enough? Is even execution enough? Isn't revenge much? Much is sweeter, surely. If you take revenge, the police will arrest you and you will have to pay, perhaps with your life. Not if you're rich, powerful, and intelligent. But gentlemen, why are we talking about this at carnival time? I see my servants have got lunch ready. Why don't you join me during the excellent lunch? Franz tried to discover what Albert thought of the Count, but his friend was too interested in the Count's food and conversation to worry about anything else. Franz noticed that the Count was also looking closely at Albert, and he could not understand why. In the afternoon, all three went in the Count's carriage to watch the execution from the windows of the Hotel Rospoli. Large crowd filled the square as the 2 prisoners were brought to the foot of the guillotine. As a soldier ran up, waving a piece of paper, Peppino was free to go, and the guillotine fell on only 1 prisoner that day. The next day, Franz and Albert lost themselves in the excitement of carnival. Count had kindly lent them his carriage, so wearing masks, they drove up and down the street, waving and throwing flowers to any pretty girls in the other carriages. Albert felt sure that a beautiful woman in a green mask was interested in him, and when he got a note from her, he read it out excitedly to a friend. Tomorrow at 7 o'clock, get out of your carriage at the church of San Giacomo. Meet me on the step. In the following evening, Franz watched Albert meet the lady at the church and go off into the crowd, arm in arm with her. Later now, Franz began to worry about his friend. Rome could be a dangerous city during carnival, especially at night. There was a knock on his door, and Signor Pastrini brought in a man with a letter in his hand. Franz thought that he recognized Peppino, but he was more interested in the letter. It said, Franz, bandits have kidnapped me. Give all the money in my traveling bag to the man who brings you this note. Under this message said in Italian, if I don't have 20,000 francs in my hands by 6 o'clock, Monsieur Albert will die. Luigi Bampa. Franz read the note in horror. He knew that he and Albert did not have 20,000 francs, and he had an idea. The Count's room. The Count listened with interest to Franz's story. Don't you think that if we go together to meet Luigi Bampa, he'll let Albert go free? But what power have I got over this bandit? Didn't you say Peppino's life 2 days ago? And Luigi Bampa very grateful to you? The Count wondered how Franz knew about that, but he agreed to help. He, Franz, and Peppino drove beyond the city wall, and then Peppino took them through a number of underground caves and tunnels to where the bandits were. The chief, Luigi Bampa, was surprised to see the Count, and very angry with his men when he realized that Albert was a friend of the Count. He refused to take any money from Franz, so Albert was a free man again. And when they arrived back at the hotel, he said, you saved my life, Count. I'm very grateful. He held out his hand, and Franz noticed the Count shudder. If I hope one day I'll see you in Paris, Count, where my parents will be able to thank you themselves. I have some business there in 3 months' time, said the Count. May I visit you then, say 21st May at 10:30 in the morning. I'm leaving Rome tomorrow. So goodbye for now, my friend. The Count in Paris. 3 months later, in the house in Paris where Albert and his parents lived, everything was ready for the Count of Monte Cristo's visit. At 10 o'clock in the morning, Albert's friends just started arriving. Monsieur Lucien Debray, Monsieur de Buchan, the Baron Chateau Renard, and Maximilian Morel, who was wearing his army officer's uniform. Half an hour later, a servant threw open the door of Albert's dining room and said, His Excellency the Count of Monte Cristo. All the young men turned to look at the Count, who entered dressed in the most elegant clothes. He came forward, smiling and was introduced to Albert's friend. When he heard the name of Morel, his eyes shone and he shook Maximilian's hand, saying, Monsieur is clearly a brave soldier. That surprised everyone, but Chateau Renaud said, You are right, Count. He saved my life in the last battle that we were in. I was there at the right time, that's all, said Maximilian. Talking of saving lives, said Albert, it was the Count who saved mine when I was in Rome for the carnival with the French Depini. Come, Albert, laughed Debray. You'll tell us you were kidnapped by bandits next. Debray, you guessed it. Now please sit down and I'll tell you all the story about a dangerous bandit called Louis Vampa and a poor Frenchman called Albert Morcerf. The story impressed all Albert's friends and they turned once more to look at the Count with even greater interest, but he clearly wanted to talk about something else. Did I hear that you are planning to marry very soon? Well, Count, it is true that my father wants me to marry Baron Danglars' daughter, Eugenie, replied Albert. She'll bring 2 million francs with her, said the Buchan. Baron Danglars? Ah, I have letters of credit for him. He'll be my banker while I'm in Paris. Conversation moved on, and an hour or so later, Albert's friend said goodbye and left the house. Albert took the Count to his French smiley sitting room, sent a servant to find him. Monsieur de Morcerf was the first to arrive. Fernand did not recognize the Count, who kept his face half hidden. Welcome to my house, de Morcerf. I shall always be grateful to you for saving the life of my only son. Before the Count could reply, another door opened and a woman entered. It is my mother, Albert said. Many thank you, Count, said Mercedes. Monte Cristo, turning quickly, saw Madame de Morcerf standing in the doorway. Mercedes shuddered as the Count stood up and bowed deeply. She bowed too, in silence. Has she seen through his disguise? Are you ill, mother? Asked Albert, hurrying towards her. No, I was just thinking how much I owe to this gentleman. She moved towards the Count, walking like a queen. Let me thank you, Count. With all a mother's feeling, Albert is safe and well because you helped him when he was in danger. She went on to invite the Count to spend the rest of the day at the house, but he politely refused and left soon afterwards. But when Albert found his mother alone, they started talking about their guest. Does he really have the title of Count? Yes, mother, he owns an island called Monte Cristo, and the title comes with it. How old do you think he is? Between 35 and 36, I suppose. So young. It's impossible. Mercedes whispered. She shuddered. Albert, be very careful. Is this man really your friend? I think so, mother. I like him. And he saved my life. His mother did not reply to this, and the conversation ended. Count Stewart, the Bertuccio, had found an elegant house in an expensive part of Paris for Monte Cristo to live in. There was also a house in Touille, a village just south of Paris, which the Count was interested in. So Bertuccio had bought it for him. That evening, the Count ordered the Bertuccio to go with him to see the house in Touille. But as they were coming closer to the house, the Count noticed how worried Bertuccio seemed to be. When they entered the house, John could not hide his feeling and cried, Excellency, something terrible happened here. This was Monsieur de Villefort's house, you see. The crown prosecutor who married Renée Saint-Méran. Yes, he's a wicked criminal, and the crime happened here. Bertuccio, tell me all about it. Then the Monarch told his story. In 15, my brother was murdered. But when Villefort refused to punish the murderer, I promised that I would take revenge on him. I followed Villefort secretly and discovered that although he was married to Renée Méran, the crown prosecutor was keeping a mistress in a house in Touille. There was this house which now belongs to you, Excellency. The Count smiled and Bertuccio went on. Oh, was not I hid in the garden, hoping to kill Villefort? The crown prosecutor hurried out of the house with a small wooden box in his hand, dug a hole in the ground where he hid the box. I jumped out from behind the tree and pushed a knife deep into the prosecutor's chest. I did not wait to see if he was dead, but took the box out of the hole, and went out of the garden. Go on, Bertuccio, said the cow. Well, when I heard the cry come from the box, I opened and found a newborn baby boy inside. Took the baby to one of the city's orphanages. But a few years later, I and my dead brother's wife, Asunta, decided to take care of the baby ourselves, so we went to fetch him from the orphanage. We called him Benedetto, and made him one of the family. Sadly, he was naturally wicked. And one night when he was 14, he stole all our money while I was away from home. Set fire to the house and went away, and poor Asunta was found dead in the next morning. Corsacani, no one will punish you for what you've done. You didn't kill Villefort, and he'll pay for his crime. Don't worry. We'll return to Paris now. Since his arrival, the ladies and gentlemen of Paris could talk about nothing except the Count. He sent Bertuccio to buy Madame Danglars' horses at twice the price, and then gave them back to her as a present. Then he sent his letters of credit to Baron Danglars, so the bankers had to give him 500,000 francs at once, and worry about finding another 5 million by the end of the year. With his house, servants, and carriages and horses, the Count of Monte Cristo lived more elegantly and expensive than anyone else in Paris. The Count found out that Maximilian Morel had left Marseille after the death of his father. He now lived with his sister Julie and her husband Emmanuel in a pleasant house in a quiet part of Paris. He went to visit them and realized at once how much these three people loved each other. In their sitting room, he noticed a small red purse on a table and asked Miss Maximilian about it. The young man picked up the purse and kissed it. The purse Count was touched by the hand of a man who saved our father from death, a stranger who called himself a Sinbad the sailor. I haven't yet lost hope, said Julie, that one day I may find him and kiss his hand. She was looking closely at the Count. Did she recognize something about Lord Wilmore in him? I do know an Englishman called Rodmere, said the Count, hurriedly turning his face away from her, who has very often helped people. Oh, monsieur, if you cannot bring him to us, tell us where he is. We'll show him how deeply grateful we are to him. The Count had tears in his eyes as he turned back to her, watched the lovely face carefully. Madame, I fear Lord Wilmore may no longer be alive. Oh, monsieur. Dear sister, remember what our good father often told us? It was not an Englishman who saved him. The Count shuddered. Your father said, what, monsieur? My father thought the man was someone who had come back from the dead, a dear, dear friend whom he had lost when he was about to die. The last words were, it was Edmond Dantes. For a moment, the Count could not say a word, and he picked up his head and said to Julie, Madame, I'm grateful to you for the peace that I find here. It's the first time for many years that I've been able to forget my trouble. And he hurried away down the street. He's a strange man, this Count, said Emmanuel. Yes, but he has a good heart. His voice touched me deeply, and 2 or 3 times I thought it wasn't the first time I had heard it. In the Love and Money, Chapter 8, Monsieur Villefort's wife, Miran, had died young, leaving him a daughter, the Valentine. He married again, and with his second wife had a son, Edward. They all lived in the Villefort's large house in Paris with his father, Monsieur Noirtier, who was paralyzed after an illness. Valentine loved the grandfather dearly, and she spent many hours taking care of him. Behind the house was a large flower garden, and then a huge stone wall. On the other side of the wall were fields where poor people grew their vegetables. One evening, that spring, a young man disguised in workman's clothes walked up to the wall, took a stone away from the wall, called softly through the hole, Valentine. I'm here, Maximilian, replied the girl in a white dress, running through the garden to the hole on her side of the wall. Do you still love me? You know I do, Maximilian, but what can I do? My stepmother hates me because I have more money than her son. And my father wants to marry Baron Franz d'Epinay. Valentine, I'll die before I see you married to another man. We'll have to run away together and have a secret wedding. I think you're right. Oh, go away. Someone's coming. Maximilian left the wall and quickly started digging. He heard a servant saying, to Valentine, your stepmother is asking for you. Mademoiselle, the Count of Monte Cristo had arrived. At that moment, the Count was in Madame Villefort's sitting room. He had come. He sat at the door as a new neighbor to visit the family, but he really wanted to learn more about Villefort's home life as part of his plan to take revenge on the Count prosecutor. So he talked about anything and everything, and Madame Villefort, who loved the sound of her own voice, said and talked lonely and freely with him. He had already discovered that she had no time to take care of the paralyzed Monsieur Nortier. That she loved the little son more than anyone else, and that she thought Valentine's money should belong to Edouard. Now they were talking about poisons, which greatly interested the prosecutor's wife. When Valentine entered, Madame Villefort introduced her to the Count, and then sent away. A few minutes later, she closed the door carefully after the girl. Now, Count, let's continue our conversation. You were telling me how a person can protect himself against the poison. It's easy, madame. You take a few drops of the poison every day, a little more each time. Then, after a month, you and another person could drink poison from the same glass. Person who had drunk it with you would die, while you had just to feel a little unwell. How interesting. I've studied medicines and poison during my travels around the world. Made a most useful medicine. One drop makes you feel fresh and alive, but 5 or 6 would kill you. And you can't taste it? I wonder. Could you possibly let me have some? I so often feel tired. I'm sure it would help me. Count promised to send the medicine to her the next day. Left the house delighted with a successful visit. That evening, Albert and his friend Chateau René went to the theater. They saw Madame Danglars sitting with her lover, Lucie Debray, and her daughter Eugene. Eugene is a beautiful girl, said Chateau René. I would prefer someone gentler. But look at the box over there. All eyes on the theater were turned towards the box. Men in black, between 35 and 40 years old, had just entered with a beautiful young woman in a long white dress covered with jewels. It's a Monte Cristo and his Greek slave, Haydée, said Albert. A slave? Chateau René, that's what he calls her. I think he bought her somewhere in the East to protect her from some terrible danger. Then Albert's father came into the theater when Haydée saw Fernanda de Morcerf. She gave a little scream. My lord, she whispered to the Count. Who is that man? Monsieur de Morcerf, who fought in Greece under your famous father. Was well paid for it, I understand. It was this man who sold my poor father, Ali Pasha, to the enemy. We thought he was our friend, but when the enemy offered him money, he helped them to kill my father. I hate him. Come, child. You're getting too excited. We'll go home. Albert, Chateau René, and the other people in the theater could not hear this conversation. They thought the Greek girl was unwell as they watched the Count taking her out of the box. The next day, a young man in Italian clothes was shown into the Count's living room. It's Andrea de Cavalcanti, isn't it? Said the Count, remembering the new name and the first life story they had given to Villefort's son, Benedetto. Oh, yes, Count, replied the young man, trying to remember what he had learnt. Come from a good old Italian family. When I was a child, I was kidnapped by bandits, so it's some years since I saw my dear old father. Your friend Sinbad, the sailor, seemed to think you could help me. Of course, my dear Cavalcanti, said the Count. The young man clearly had no idea that Monte Cristo and Sinbad were one and the same man. Then the Count called to his servant, bring in Major Bartolomeo. Cavalcanti at once, an old man is in uniform, entered. Excellency, is this my son? Yes, the Count, trying to forget his criminal past and remember his new name and life story too. Lord Wilmore told me I would find him here. That's right, Major. The old man clearly hadn't seen through his different guises either, and now that you've found each other again, let me give you some money to help you live for a while in this expensive city. 50,000 francs each will do to start with. The young man and the old man looked at each other, their mouths open. Money than they had ever dreamed of. On Saturday, I'd like to introduce you to some of my friends, the Count went on. So come to my house in hotel at 5 o'clock. The Count sent an unsigned message to Lucien Debray, saying that he should sell any Spanish bonds that he owned, because the Queen of Spain was in danger from her enemy, Don Carlos. He knew what would happen at once. Debray told Madame Danglars, who told her husband. Danglars sold all his Spanish bonds, but the next day he realized the news was not true. He had lost 1,000,000 francs. The Count's plans for revenge were going well. At 5 o'clock on Saturday, carriages began to arrive at the Count's house in a hotel. The first came Baron Danglars and his wife, with Lucy and Debray and Maximilian Morel, and then Villefort and his wife. The Count smiled secretly as he noticed both Villefort and Madame Danglars looked around fearfully as they entered the house. So then he found the Bertuccio at his shoulder. "Excellency," said the steward, "the woman over there." "You mean Madame Danglars? I don't know her name, but that's her, the woman who was Villefort's mistress and lived in this house." And my God, he turned white as he saw Andrea Gabaletti. Benedetto, he whispered. "Stay silent and go back to your work," said the Count. The Count offered to show his guests around the house. Danglars chose to stay downstairs talking about business with the Cavalcanti. He liked them because he felt sure they were very rich. "I must show you one of the bedrooms," said the Count. "I think someone committed a crime there. Follow me." He took the rest of his guests into a small dark bedroom on the first floor. "You see, it's painted red. Think of the blood that surely fell here." The Villefort looked white, and Madame Danglars fell into a chair. "And here are some secret stairs that go down to the garden," cried the Count, throwing open a small door. "I feel sure that the criminal went this way, taking a dead body out of the house to hide it in the garden." "Anis somewhere," cried Madame Danglars. "And in fact, I know a crime was committed because when my men were digging in the garden, they found a box with a dead baby's body in it." "That's serious," said Debray, and as the guests left the room and went downstairs, Villefort took the chance to whisper in Madame Danglars' ear, the Count knows our secret. I'll find out what he's planning. Be strong. Say nothing to anyone." Villefort did indeed try to find out more about the Count, but in the next few days, his own family began to give him more to worry about. Madame Saint-Méran, the Villefort's old mother-in-law, came to stay at the Villefort's house, and she wanted to see her granddaughter Valentine married as soon as possible. So the signing of the contract to marry Franz at the Pinay was fixed for 9 o'clock in the evening of that same day. Maximilian was wild with worry that he would lose his Valentine. They agreed they would run away together that evening, but he waited and waited at the hole in the wall. Valentine did not come. Later he discovered that her grandmother had died suddenly, and that the doctor thought that she had died from poison. The person who would get all her money was Valentine, and no one else seemed to have any reason to poison the old lady. People began to say that perhaps Valentine was a poisoner, and the servants began to leave the Villefort's house one by one. Maximilian was now very unhappy. He did not believe all the story, but he knew that his plans to marry Valentine would have to wait. He was ready to kill Franz de Penny if necessary to protect Valentine from a husband whom she did not love. Chapter 9, Revenge. The Villefort was determined to marry his daughter to Franz Epinay, to invite the young man home with him after Madame Saint-Méran's funeral in order to sign the wedding contract. But when they were all in the sitting room ready to sign, servant hurried in saying, "Monsieur Noirtier wants to see Baron d'Epinay at once." The Villefort, Franz, and Valentine went up to the bedroom of the paralyzed old man. He could only move his eyes, but over the years, Valentine had learned how to understand his wishes. He now made it clear to her that there was a paper in his desk, which he wanted Franz to read. The young man read the paper aloud. Now, for the first time, he discovered what had happened to his own father, a royalist. Monsieur Noirtier was with a group of men who wanted Napoleon to return to France. They had kidnapped Franz's father because he was a royalist. Monsieur Noirtier himself had killed him. There was tears in Franz's eyes as he read the words. He wrote to Villefort saying that he no longer felt able to marry Valentine. He was very grateful to her grandfather for stopping a wedding that she really did not want to happen. At the same time, Baron Danglars, whose business was not doing well, was becoming more and more impressed with the young Andrea Cavalcanti. He was supposed to have a lot more money in the family. Now that I have heard about the terrible thing that Albert's father did in the Greek war, I don't think that I want his son to marry my daughter. No good for business. So when Andrea asked the Baron if he could marry Eugenie, Danglars was happy to agree. The next day, Albert was reading a newspaper when he noticed to his horror a short article which said that in the Greek war, a French officer took money from the enemy to help them kidnap and murder Ali Pasha, a friend of the French. The officer's first name was Ferdinand. Albert hurried round to the newspaper offices at once to speak of his friend Buckham, who worked there. Buckham, look at this article. My father's first name is Ferdinand. Everyone would think that he did this terrible thing. Don't worry, Albert. I'll find out if it's true. Buckham visited Albert's home. Bad news, my friend. I've been to Greece and I have these papers for you. They show that the article in the newspaper was true. Your father was indeed a traitor. I'm sorry. But looked at him with the staring eyes. But it's you, my friend. Let me burn this paper now, and people will soon forget the story. They burned the paper there and then. But the story reappeared in other newspaper, and soon even the gentleman of the upper house were talking about it when Monsieur de Montcalf arrived 1 day. There he found everyone was looking angrily at him, and he was asked to explain what had happened between him and Ali Pasha in the Greek war. As the upper house waited for his answer, he flashed of water and his hands were shaking as he spoke. I'm no traitor, gentlemen. I was a friend of Ali Pasha. Tried to save him, but I arrived too late. No traitor. You're lying. You accepted the enemy's gold for the head of Ali Pasha. That's why you are rich today. I know. Please. And so it all. I am Haiti, Ali Pasha's daughter. All eyes turned to the public part of the house where the Greek girl was standing. Then they looked back at Monsieur de Morcerf. He bowed his head and said nothing. The upper house took only a few minutes to decide that he was a traitor and should no longer sit in the house. Then Morcerf went home alone. Albert had heard from Buckham that it was Baron Danglars who had sent the information about his father's part to the newspaper. So he went to call on the banker. It wasn't my idea, young man. It came from the Count of Monte Cristo, the Count. But I thought he was my friend. He went straight to the theater where the Count was in the usual box with the Maximilian Morel. Count, throwing open the door of the box, you must give me an explanation. I do not accept much from anyone, said the Count icily. But you will accept my invitation to fight, perhaps? Shall we say tomorrow at 10 in the morning? Albert bowed and left the box, and the Count smiled. But when Monte Cristo returned home that night, he found the woman waiting to see him. Is Madame de Morcerf? Mercedes had not wanted to recognize Edmond openly in front of her husband, but it was clear now that she knew who the Count of Monte Cristo really was. Oh, Edmond, she cried, please do not kill my son. I promise to take my revenge, madame, not on Albert, but on his father Ferdinand, who married my fiancée, as you know. Oh, Edmond, you should punish me. I wasn't strong enough to wait for you. I thought you were dead, Edmond. I may not be as beautiful as I was, but I love you still. Don't let me see the man I love become the murderer of my son. What is it that you want, he asked. Your son's life? Well, then he shall live. Mercedes gave a cry that brought tears to his eye. Oh, Edmond, thank you, thank you. You're so good. But your poor Edmond won't live long. Tomorrow he must die if Albert is to live, replied the Count. Her beautiful eyes were wet with tears as she offered him her hand. Don't say that, Edmond. There is always hope. God will not let you die. And with that, she left the room. The Count sat there in the darkness, thinking miserably of his plans of revenge. Albert's mother had destroyed. Now he seemed to have nothing left to live for. But the next morning at the meeting place, he was surprised to see Albert coming toward him in a friendly way. Monsieur, I'd like to say I'm sorry because my father was a traitor to Ali Pasha, but because he was a traitor to you, his friend. When you were both young men in Marseille, my mother has told me everything. You're right to take revenge on my father, and I, his son, say so. Mercedes had bravely told Albert her painful secret in order to keep both him and the Count alive. With a tear in his eye, the Count shook hands warmly with Albert. There was no fight that day. Some of Albert's friends looked coldly at him the next time they met, whispered that he had not been brave enough to fight the Count. When Ferdinand de Morcerf saw his son return home unhurt, he could not understand what had happened, and ordered his servant to drive him straight to the Count's house. He was shown it, and what? Count, my son had good reason to fight you today. You think so, monsieur? In fact, he said he was sorry, so the fight didn't take place. He said he was sorry. He didn't fight you? No. His father had committed. No, he realized his father had committed terrible crime. Why do you say that? Who are you? What's your real name? You know me very well. You married my fiancée after all. Monsieur de Morcerf gave a cry of horror. Edmond Dantes, with shaking legs, he ran out of the room and returned home in the carriage, while Albert and Mercedes were packing the clothes and getting ready to leave the house that they both now hated because they knew that it was paid for with the traitor's money. Ferdinand went to his bedroom. There he took a small gun from his desk, and as the carriage door was taking away his wife suddenly left out, a shot rang out. News of Monsieur de Mercedes had only just reached his neighbor when they heard another piece of interesting news. Andrea Cavalcanti was supposed to sign the contract to marry Eugenie Danglars at 9 that evening, but just as the banker was about to sign, the police entered the house. Arrested Andrea, it appeared that he had escaped from prison and had since committed murder. No one named Mademoiselle Eugenie quietly left the house. She had decided to stay unmarried, was going off to travel around Spain and Italy with a woman friend. The Count was pleased with the success of his plans so far. Ferdinand was dead, Danglars would soon be bankrupt, and there was a prisoner at work in Billy's house, whom the Count loved like a son, told him that Valentine was his fiancée. The Count realized he could not let her die, along with the rest of the Villefort family. Maximilian Fesson was giving her poison, but the Count promised the young man that he would protect her from danger. Count visited Valentine in her room by using some secret sleeping potion, which would make her appear to be dead. The next morning, the servants found Valentine silent, cold in her bed. The doctor saw Madame Veloso with a glass of poison in her hand. For sure that she must be the murderer, so he told the husband. But poor Maximilian heard the news with horror. He had Monte Cristo's promise that Valentine would not die, and now he felt that his life had ended. Le decided the funeral would be on the following day. The Count, again using the secret stair, with her body laying there, he has something important to do before the coffin left for the graveyard. The next day, Marshal sadness as you watch the fiancé coffin going into the ground was great, but the Count was watching him and followed him back to his sister's house. Found the young man writing a letter with his gun on the desk. My dear young friend, you mustn't kill yourself. One who meant everything to me is dead. The man who saved your father, I'm Edmond Dante. Marcus jumped up and called to his sister and her husband. He came running to throw themselves at the Count's feet and kiss his hand. The Count knew that Maximilian was still thinking of that, so he asked them to leave him alone with Maximilian again. Keep your body all hope alive, my friend. Come and stay with me for a month, and if at the end of time you still want to kill yourself, I'll put a gun in your hands myself. A week later, Andrea Cavalcanti appeared in court to answer for his crime. Crown prosecutor as to what his real merit, the young man explained that he was a Villefort's own son, left to die in a box in the Auteuil garden to the horror of everyone's court. Villefort bowed his head and said it was all true. Then he left the court and hurried home. He found the bodies of his wife and son, but poisoned by her hand as he was looking at them. He heard the voice behind him. Monsieur, you finally paid your debt to me. Count Monte Cristo standing there. What debt? He asked. I'm Edmond Dantes, said the Count. Well, Edmond Dantes, look. Showing him the two bodies. Have you had your revenge now? I'll find him soon. The box must be here somewhere. He's gone mad, thought the Count. Perhaps I've done too much. Enough is enough. Chapter 10, A New Life. Maximilian was still depressed after Valentine's funeral and couldn't stop thinking of taking his own life. So the Count decided to take him to Marseille, where when they arrived at the port, they saw that a large army ship was leaving for North Africa. The Count watched the woman on the dockside. The man on the ship, look, Count. It's Albert de Morcerf, the soldier in soldier's uniform. Yes, I know. When Maximilian said that he wanted to go alone to see his father's grave, Monte Cristo followed the woman from the dockside back to his father's old house. He had given Mercedes the house to live in. He pushed open the door and found Mercedes in the garden. Oh, I'm so unhappy. Tears in her eyes. My son has left me to join the army. He did well. You must work for your future and his. Sadly shook her head. There is no future for me, Count. I have drunk deeply from life's bitter cup. But here at last I can die where I was once so happy. The Count raised a hand to his lips and kissed it sadly. What will you do now, Mercedes? I'll stay here in your father's house and pray. My life is finished. Say goodbye to me, Edmund. They held hands for a moment, and the Mercedes went into the house. The Count never saw her again. While walking back to the port, idea suddenly came to the Count. Perhaps I should go to the Chateau d'If again to remind myself of the horror of it. The captain of a passing boat to take him there. He felt the same terror as on the first journey. Caretaker, and told him the story of the prisoner who was thrown into the sea in a sack. That was me. How long ago it seems now. When he returned to Marseille, the Count found Maximilian praying beside his father's grave. Maximilian, I have business in Rome. I'll leave you here for 2 weeks, but on October 4th, I'll send a boat to fetch you, and you will come to me, meet me on the island of Monte Cristo. Come. On October 5th, it'll be a month, I know. Wait and hope. Now goodbye until then. Just before Valentine's funerals, the Count had asked for his 5 million francs in gold coins from Baron Danglars. The Baron had paid, but that meant he was now bankrupt. Following day, Danglars had packed his bags and left Paris forever, taking the Count's letters of credit with him. When he arrived in Rome, he went at once to the bank that the letters came from and asked them for the money that they owed him. The Count had now written to the bank to stop the money, and he was given the 5 million francs in gold coin with no trouble at all. Kidnapped by Luigi Vampa's men and taken to the caves outside the city wall. Albert had just spent an uncomfortable few hours. His first feelings of terror had passed Danglars, hoped that they would ask him for money and let him go, but it soon became clear that he would be there for a long time. For the food, the bandits made him pay 100,000 francs. He had now been able to care for 3 weeks. When he looked at the bandits' hard and smiling face, he thought bitterly, they aren't sorry for me at all. They'll be happy to see me die. Then he saw men in the shadows at one end of the cave. Are you sorry for what you've done? Asked the man. Oh, yes. I know. I've done wicked things. Then I can give you a pardon. Stepping forward into the light, the Count of Monte Cristo? You're wrong. I'm the man whose happiness you destroyed many years ago. I am Edmond Dantes. Danglars gave a cry and fell to the ground. Oh, get up. You're lucky. One of your friends is mad and the other is dead. The vampire? Give this man his money back and let him go free. On October 4th, Maximilian arrived on the island of Monte Cristo in the Count's boat, took him into his underground palace. The young man was impressed, but the Count noticed that he never smiled. So you're still depressed, my friend? How could you think anything else, Count? I came here to join you in order to die in the arms of a friend. I can help you. He put it in his mouth, so Maximilian left a terrible pain inside. My friend, I think I'm dying, he said to the Count. Thank you for your help. With his eyes closed, then a light seemed to shine in his darkness, and a woman was holding his hand and talking lovingly to him. Once the sleeping potion stops working, he will wake up. Then you must never leave him, Valentine. I'm only sorry that it took me so long to bring you safely out of your sleep of the dead. But from what I have seen of Maximilian this month, to be happy in this world or the next, you need each other. Thank you, Count. But you must think of your own happiness now. Look who is here. The Count turned to see Haiti in the doorway. My lord, do you know how much I love you? She said. Haiti, if you were a free man and not a slave, could you still love me? Haiti did not answer, but went to kiss him. When Valentine looked again, they had both disappeared. Now would Maximilian walk? I'm still alive. My dear, said Valentine smiling, here I am. He gave a good cry and took her in her arms. Went to look for the Count. Discovered that he and Haiti had already left the island. Well, will we ever see him again? Said Maximilian. It's my dream. We must do what he always did. Wait and hope. The end.